Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go ahead and walk you through your worksheet for tonight. And I'm going to show you step by step here on all of these. These are just more practice from what you have been doing in your notes today with that substitute. So remember, if I'm going to solve the equations, I got to find out what x is, or w, or c, or whatever it might be. Okay, remember though, if I have two different types of variables, I have to use a zero product property. So if you take a look at number 1, you'll notice here that you have an x squared and an x. That's two different types of variables. So we're going to have to set this thing equal to 0, factor, and then solve. So first things first, if I want to set this equal to 0, I'm going to subtract the 64. When you take 16 and you subtract that 64, you will get negative 48. All right, there are 3 terms here. It's a trinomial. It starts with a 1, meaning I can do 2 binomials and I can do this the short way. Starting with x, I need factors of 48 that will subtract to 8. Well, factors of 48 will subtract to 8. 12 and 4. This subtraction symbol tells me my symbols need to be different, and this one tells me the bigger one needs to be negative. And now I need to go ahead and set up my equations to solve. You will get answers of 12 and negative 4. Moving on to number 2, you will notice that I only have a c squared. That is one type of variable, meaning I can go ahead and just isolate that. First thing I need to do is get rid of the 3 by dividing. When you divide that by 3, you will get 49. Now to cancel out that squared, the opposite of squaring something is square rooting it. So that leaves me with c equals 7. But remember, when I square root something, you need to put a plus or minus in front of it, meaning I have 2 answers here, positive 7 and negative 7. If you look at number 3, I only have regular w's, meaning you can solve this like a regular equation. First thing I need to do is distribute that 1/4. When I distribute that 1/4, I'll get 13 and then 3w. Get your w's together by moving the smaller one over. And then isolate. Please don't leave this as 26 over 6. It can be reduced. That would reduce to 13 over 3. That would be you also could tell me 4 1/3. You also could tell me 4.3 repeating. Any of those would be acceptable. Looking at number 4, now the directions say find the root. Finding the roots is still just solving it, folks. It means the same thing as finding the solution. So you'll notice that we only have a regular j, so I can just isolate this. The first thing I need to get rid of is that squared, so we'll square root it. 3 is not a perfect square. It's a big old decimal, so we're going to leave it as plus or minus the square root of 3. Now we got to get rid of that 9. So my final answer here will be plus or minus the square root of 3 minus 9. Okay? You can go ahead and pick up your calculators and do the positive radical 3 equals minus 9, and that should give you an answer of approximately negative 7.27. Then we'll do the negative radical 3 equals, and then subtract 9. That should give you approximately 10.73. Moving on to number 5. Again, you will notice I only have one type of variable. I only have a regular x, so I can solve this like normal. First up, we'll distribute, making sure to be careful that a negative times a negative is a positive. We'll get our variables together by moving the smaller one over. And then isolate. And that would be your final answer. In number 6, it says find the zeros. Folks, finding the zeros is the same as finding the solution, is the same as finding the root. So if I take a look here, I've got an a squared and an a, meaning I can't just isolate it. I have to do the zero product property. The zero product property tells me I need to set it equal to 0, which it is. Then I need to factor it. Well, it's a trinomial that has no GCF. It starts with a 16, so I can't do this the short way. Before you go jumping to the long way and multiplying the 16 by the 81, you'll notice those are both perfect squares. The square root of 16 is 4. The square root of 81 is 9. If I multiply those together, I get 36. And then if I double it, I get this 72 right here. So it does follow our pattern for perfect squares. So when I make those two binomials, I can go ahead and fill in my square roots. This symbol tells me they have to be the same symbol, and this symbol tells me they both need to be plus. Now, since they are both the same factors, I only need to write it once in order to solve this. We will subtract the 9, and then we'll divide by 4, and my answer would be 9/4. Of course, you could write that as a mixed number, which would be negative 2 1/4. You could also write it as a decimal, which would be negative 2.25. All right, looking at number 7, again, I have an x squared and an x, which is two different types of x's, so I have to set it equal to 0 and solve. So the first thing I'm going to do is add that 30 over. Make sure I put it in standard form in the correct order. Now I need to factor it. Well, I notice that they all have a factor of 5. I can take a 5 out of all of them. When you divide out the 5, gives you that. That is a trinomial, and this will be done the short way because there's a 1 in front of that x squared. So when I make my binomials, I can start them both with x's. I need factors of 6 that will add to 5. That would be 2 and 3. Adding tells me they have to be the same symbol, and this tells me they both have to be negative. Now I'm going to set up my equations to solve. Now that first equation will not give you an answer because 5 is not equal to 0. Second equation gives you an answer of 2, and the third equation gives you an answer of 3. All right, last two, it says find the x-intercepts. Finding the x-intercepts is the same as finding the solution, is the same as finding the root, is the same as finding the zeros. I'm going to skip over to number 9 because that one only has one type of f, so I can just isolate it. The first thing I need to do is get rid of that 3. It's being multiplied, so I'll divide. Now I got to get rid of the squared, so I'm going to square root it. Fortunately, the square root of 4 is a nice number for us. It's a perfect square. It's 2. Notice I put that plus or minus in front of it. Then we're going to subtract the 1 from both sides to isolate. Positive 2 minus 1 is 1. Negative 2 minus 1 is negative 3. Going back to number 8, you'll notice I have two different types of d's. I have a d squared and a d. Therefore, I need to use a zero product property. It's already set equal to 0. It needs to be factored. It's a trinomial with no GCF, so we're going to have to do this the long way. If you multiply 6 and 7, you get 42. I need factors of 42 that will subtract to 11. Factors of 42 that subtract to 11 are 14 and 3. Since I am subtracting, they need to be different, and the bigger one needs to be positive. Now I'm ready for a 4-term problem. Notice I'm putting my negative factor first, and we're going to group this the way you know how. Repeated factor and leftover factor. Now I am ready to set them both equal to 0. This one will need to subtract 7, divide by 3. And this one will need to add 1, divide by 2. Okay, as I said before, you will have a quiz tomorrow. We will review before your quiz briefly, and then you will take your quiz directly after that.